Personally, I'm just a home brewer. I don't really distill spirits at all, and never really have. A few guys in the club do, and I've been getting a lot of interest in the subject. I also think that with the new advent of these electric homebrewing systems, it's easier than ever to get there. So I invited George Duncan from the Barley and Hops Brewing channel to talk to me about it today on Homebrewing DIY.
Building recipes and taking good notes are two of the key fundamentals of making great beer. This is one of the first things that you learn when becoming a new brewer. I started taking notes on a sheet from my extract kit and then quickly moved to Brewing Software. I've tried many different types of brewing software, and then I found Brewfather. This is the one piece of software that you need for recipes and very detailed brew day notes, as well as fermentation notes. Brewfather also integrates with some of the topics that we discuss on this show, like the till hydrometer, the ice spindle, and ferment track. You need no other piece of software than Brewfather. One of the best parts of Brewfather is that you can try it for free. All you need to do is head to our website, homebrewingdiy.beer, and click on the Brewfather banner to sign up for free today. Once again, that's homebrewingdiy.beer and sign up for Brewfather today. Keeping a clean brewery is the key to making great beer that doesn't get contaminated. Do you use a glass or plastic carboy for your fermentation? Did you know that getting your carboy clean can be tough, especially removing the crucian ring? Even with traditional carboy cleaning tools, it can take a lot of time and not get your carboy completely clean. Well, today there's a new tool that can easily clean your carboy and do it fast, and that tool is called a scrubber ducky. Scrubber duckies are a new magnetic carboy cleaner that are easy to use and get the cleaning results required in brewing. Drop a magnetic scrubber into your carboy and be able to scrub away all of the grime and that hard to clean crucian. They are no match for scrubber duckies, and you can get yours today at scrubberduckies.com. Once again, head over to scrubberduckies.com. Have you ever wanted to make a podcast? Do you have a subject you want to discuss with listeners? Do you even know where to start? Well, if you want to make a podcast and you want to get started now, I could not recommend Anchor enough. Anchor is the easiest way to make a podcast. Anchor gives you everything you need in one place for free, which you can use right from your phone or computer. Creation tools allow you to record and edit your podcast so it sounds great. They'll distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard everywhere: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. And you can easily make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. Hey, look, I shopped around for a place to post my podcast, and Anchor was the easiest, most streamlined experience you could ask for. So if you're looking for a place for your new podcast, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Once again, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started.
And welcome back to Homebrewing DIY, the show that takes on the do-it-yourself aspect of homebrewing. Gadgets, contraptions, and parts. This show covers it all. Today we're talking to George Duncan of Barley and Hops Brewing. He's going to come over and talk to us all about distilling and how to get started. But first, I'd like to thank all of our supporters over at patreon.com. You can be a supporter of the show if you head over to patreon.com/homebrewing DIY. First, I'd like to personally thank our newest patron, Dwayne Eckert. He gave it the basic supporter level, and he's going to get a sweet gift from our sponsor, Scrubber Duckies. We actually have a couple of really amazing deals going on right now over at Patreon. If you give at the $1 level, for the first 20 supporters, you're going to get access to our ad-free RSS feed and a logo sticker. And if you give at the $5 level, you'll get all of those as well as a gift from Scrubber Duckies. I'm actually down to my last few Scrubber Ducky sets that I can send out. So if you would like to get one of those, hop on it quick and give it the $5 level. Once again, that's patreon.com/homebrewingdiy. Another way you can support the show is by reviewing us. You can head over to Apple Podcasts or podchaser.com and write us a review. All of your reviews are going to help others find the show, and it helps us rank higher on the Apple charts. Randomly, we did get a bunch of reviews last week, and it shot us up to number 65 in the food charts, which is kind of amazing. So I want to thank all the listeners for helping us make such a great milestone for the podcast. And then, of course, the last way you can support the show is by heading over to homebrewingdiy.beer and using the sponsor banners. In doing so, our sponsors then know that we sent you, and then they support us. Click on the Brewfather link and sign up today, or you can use the Adventures in Homebrewing link. Both of those are going to help them know that we sent you and have them support the show. I don't know if you remember on episode number 2, our guest Aaron Bandler, he's actually my neighbor across the street, and he is a really great guy. He actually got a great piece of brewing equipment this last weekend. He bought a mash and boil system, and he was nice enough to let me use that system on Sunday for my brew day. So I went over to his house and grabbed it, brought it over, and used it brew in a bag style, and it worked great. I knocked out a New England IPA. I would say my one drawback is that, unlike propane, it did take me a little bit longer to get it up to a boil, and other than that, it was a pretty uneventful brew day. I will also add that I really like the convenience of going with an electric system because it snowed that day, and I got to stand in my garage with the door shut. So that was something that was a very different experience for me brewing in the winter here in Denver, Colorado. But if you head over to Instagram, I got a couple of posts about the New England IPA that I made, and hopefully this time it will turn out. I tweaked my recipe just a bit. Like I said, I think I even talked about it in the last episode where I said that I used Pilsner malt instead of a pale ale malt, and I added a lot more oats. I actually went all the way up to over 25% oats for this recipe. So far, it looks great. The color looks pretty spot on, and I'm actually starting my dry hop tomorrow in the middle of High Cruisin', so I think it's going to end up being a pretty great beer. Well, I guess this is now a good time to segue into the show for today, where I talked to George Duncan, and we talked about the beginner's guide to home distilling. I'd like to welcome George Duncan to Homebrewing DIY. Hi, George. How are you doing?
Oh, doing wonderful. Glad to be here, as usual.
Awesome. And if anybody hasn't heard of George Duncan, he's got this really great YouTube channel. I think they're now above 50,000 subscribers. He's probably
we just crossed 60K.
Wow, that's a big number.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so he's corrected. He is now over 60,000, and he's got a YouTube channel that covers a wide variety of subjects, specifically around brewing beer, distilling. I think he's now becoming the foremost authority of distilling on YouTube right now. And I'd like to let's talk a bit about your community and the YouTube channel you have, and and how it's kind of grown and blossomed into what it is today.
All right. Well, look, I appreciate that intro, and I think you give me a bit too much credit about being the foregoing, whatever it was you said I was. Yeah, there you go. His old age is showing up on me. This is such a wonderful community. And then again, first of all, I just want to say thanks to everybody out there who made this channel possible, because we did it off the backs of us. We didn't. No one's paid for anything. We've taken nothing from anybody. This channel just grew on its own based on the interest of the community, and we spend a lot of time just trying to validate what we always say is we like to unlock the mysteries of home distilling, because as well as I do, even with home brewing, there's a certain amount of mystique about it. It's like, well, I know how to do this, and I'll tell you everything I want you to know, but not everything you really need to know. And that happens way too often, and we do our very best to unlock the mysteries, share information from the community, as well as share information with the community. So that's kind of it.
Yeah, I would say that when we talk about YouTube communities, you have probably one of the most active I've seen out there. People, you post a video, there's tons of feedback, tons of questions. You spend a lot of time answering questions from people, not even on your personal phone and your email, but really just in general on the channel.
Yeah, but that is a key to anybody who has a YouTube channel. Make sure you check your comments. I mean, if your community feels the love that they're going to leave you a comment, the least you could do is look at it.
Yeah, I completely agree. But you've been doing a lot of distilling. I think is kind of become the main focus of your channel. Would you say now?
It really has. It's kind of morphed itself into sort of like the natural progression, from wine making, beer making, and believe it or not, my history starts it kind of like reversed. I grew up in the backwoods of Virginia. I often say our stop sign said "whoa." I got my first store bought haircut when I was a junior in high school. We were poor, and so I grew up around distilling. And so did my whole family. So I didn't get into beer until years later. And then now I've kind of come full circle, and it lends itself and it blends so perfectly with the beer wine community that it's really transparent at this point. Because, I mean, heck, at the end of the day, what we're doing is we're creating the alcohol, which is a long topic. And then we choose what to do with it at the very end. We carbonate it, bottle it, or separate it. And that's kind of where we're at. And I mean, there are some really good tried and true practices, and there's a lot of science behind it. I always talk about it. I say it's a 10th grade science project, but unfortunately, we know how men are. We're gonna outthink it because I don't care what the boiling point of water is. I'm gonna try some way to trick it and do it a little differently. I always say, too, that, look, there's no right way to do the wrong thing. Don't violate the principles. Have your own techniques, but just don't violate the principles. Man, everything will go okay.
Yeah, I totally agree, because even in beer brewing and as well with distilling, I would think, is that there's a lot of dogma out there. And some of that dogma may not be backed up by science or experiment. It's just this is the way we've always done it, or it's steeped in tradition, right? And so I think that one of the cool approaches of your channel is that you dive into and do a lot of experiments. You guys and you pull out the whiteboard and go through these experiments step by step with your community. And you do follow-up videos on those experiments and really deep dive into what you're working on and come to really great conclusions. And sometimes you throw out something that's super dogmatic. Sometimes it gets validated, right? And so I think that's a really great approach, even to brewing or distilling or really just any type of making. Or, I mean, you can even apply that to cooking. But the idea is that...
absolutely. Yeah.
But the idea is that I think that, that is kind of a great approach of your channel that you don't see when people are giving instruction on homebrewing or distilling. They usually just talk it through of these are the steps you take and don't give background.
It's sort of like you throw this in, you do that, you turn this way. Yeah, I understand. This kind of brings up a good point because and not to detract from the channel, because I'm in love with the community and the channel and everything's going really well. But, in that channel itself, you would not believe the number of new distillers or new brewers that just kind of pop in and go, hey, I'm brand new to this. I'm glad I found your channel. I need some help.
Absolutely. I've noticed that you've recently done a really great series for the new distiller that's kind of like a step-by-step guide, right?
Yeah, we did we call it the Beginner's Guide to Home Distilling, and it's I say it's 11, but it's actually 12 videos because the last one is part 1 and part 2. But what we try to do is we try to take it step by step and go, okay, look, we either know absolutely nothing or we're a beer brewer, because there's the basic equipment, And first of all, I don't want to say people want to do it on the cheap. Of course, you don't want to break the bank. Okay, I got that. But remember, you do get what you pay for. And there are some substitutes that are adequate, but then there are some that are just not. And I always answer the question, don't ask me if I should, or don't ask me if I could, ask me if I should, which is a totally different question. But what we do is we walk through this process and we're like, okay, look, you need buckets of some sort, some type of fermenters, and we explain what that equipment is, because it's really basic equipment. You're talking about a couple of buckets, some airlocks, a hydrometer, and we discuss what a hydrometer does. It's our measurement tool. And then we just go right into how does the still actually work, and then we talk about, and these are the ones that I think are really, really beneficial. Is we do a separate video on yeast to describe all the different yeast strains. Then we do one on sugars, and we actually get down to a scientific approach and on a molecular level to a degree on sugars, and then water. And then after that, it's sort of like bringing it all together, So if someone were to watch these at the very end, no, you're not going to have a degree in distilling, but you'll walk away from it and go, God, I think I got it,
Yeah, you should be able to watch these 12 videos, go through the steps, and as long as you make the investment in getting your equipment, or if you already have some of the equipment laying around, you should be able to at least make a spirit, right?
Exactly. Now, but there's a caveat to that, because I want to be cautious. I get so many emails, of course, and phone calls. It's first of all, we got the folklore out there about methanol stuff. I got a couple of videos on that. We even go through history to try to describe a lot of stuff, history, science, and a lot of other things. But then there's I just use a pressure cooker and I put a 3/8 copper line in it. Now, here's the question. Will it work? Yes. Is it efficient? No. My point being is that you can disappoint yourself up front by getting a pressure cooker, and then you go through everything that we try to explain, and then you make your mash, and now it's your equipment that's going to fault you, not you, but your equipment. And then you run the still, and you're like, I'm getting like 60 proof. What the heck is this? And all of a sudden you're turned off, and you're not failing because you've done something wrong. You're actually failing because your equipment is failing you. If you follow me?
Yeah, to me it seems like, and this comes from somebody I'm going to be very clear. I've never distilled anything before. I want to be upfront, but from knowing the process a bit and understanding science a bit, to me, distilling, because the boiling point of alcohol and the evaporation point of alcohol is so much lower than water, right? There is a certain level of fine-tuning the temperature on the hot side and the cold side, to me, that would need to have a certain piece of equipment that you would, whatever that equipment is, that needs to be very accurate in the fact that you have a certain steaming point, because once you start bringing the water vapor into the alcohol vapor, you're going to lose efficiency and you're going to have a lower proof. That is
go ahead.
Yeah, am I right? Am I going down the right idea there?
Well, you are definitely in the ballpark, but we've got a couple of misnomers there, if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
One of it, proof has everything to do with process and equipment. Okay, so you got to talk about efficiency. A 3/8 hole where you're trying to push vapor through is very restrictive. Okay, and then with pressure, every time you increase pressure, what happens? Your boiling point drops. So now now you're chasing temperatures in your kettle. You need to have an opening where you can transfer vapors out. The next thing is a thermometer at the head of your column or at the top of your still, wherever we call the point of no return, where your vapors depart, is the best place to put it, because that's where you want to know what the temperature is. And you can control the temperature by several different means. But that's one way to become really efficient with it and also have some really, really great results. But again, I hearken back to the kind of do some research and be cautious, because a lot of people think that, well, if I got a low ABV mash, then I'm just going to get a low proof. Well, there could not be a difference greater than proof coming out of a still and ABV of mash going into the still. They are not even, they don't even compare. You follow me?
Yeah, because you're just going to have less actual alcohol because there's less alcohol there.
Exactly.
But the proof would be the same.
Right. Yeah, it would be the same if your process is fine-tuned. And you're right about that. You've got to be able to fine-tune it. And you've got this, what they call an azeotropic blend. You got water and ethanol, okay? Water's 212, ethanol is like 173. But when you put them together, they're a positive azeotrope. So that means that the boiling point is lower than the lowest constituent. So it's right below ethanol. It's like 171.8. Okay, that's what happens. But the majority of your vapor is filled with ethanol, and less of it is filled with water. And over a period of time, those two lines start to intersect and come back together until you get to the very end where the vapor of ethanol and water are equal. You're way at the end of the run collecting tails.
Okay, that makes total sense. So let's talk about I've never distilled before, and
okay.
I'm sure a lot of people who listen to this show are mainly homebrewers and have never distilled before as well, but have been thinking about it. And we're now at a time where there's lots of these electric breweries out there, like the Grainfather and the Brewzilla and the Mash and Boil, and they're pretty inexpensive. Like, for example, for about $300 or $400, I can have a pretty amazing electric brewery that used to be multiple of thousands of dollars to achieve, right?
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
And so with this advent of cheaper electric brewing and the ability to get a top that is already pre-made that can turn that into a still, I think that distilling it at least is more accessible than it's ever been. And
you're absolutely right. It's way more.
Yeah, and so what I want to do is maybe say, hey, I've never distilled before. I've got a small electric brewery and or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Or I just want to get into distilling. What would you say I would do to get started? I have either am brand new and have no equipment, or I have maybe a basic homebrewing setup, like a brew in a bag setup or something like that. What would it take for me to get into distilling, and what would be the approach I should take to do it right?
Okay. Yeah. If you already have brewing equipment, you've got all you need, with the exception of the proof and trail hydrometer, because we use that to test the proof of spirits after distillation. And of course, you need a still. I mean, that's really it. So you're only adding two more items to your repertoire. And I mean, that could be, it could be the Turbo 500, which is turn it on, get it, adjust it, and forget it, which is really simple. I mean, that thing will pump out 180 proof from start to finish, because it's designed to be a reflux still, and that's all it does. There's a bunch of Chinese knockoffs. Be cautious, though. Again, if you go online and you see a 5-gallon still with a thumper and a coiled evaporator, and it's $126, man, run as fast as you can away from it. Come on. I mean, be realistic. It's like walking on a new car lot, and the guy wants $200 for a brand new car. You're like, yeah, something wrong.
Yeah, and it's going to be there. Yes, it will be there, and it may get the job done, but there will be inherently some design flaw. That's the thing I found with most of the Chinese stuff that is
yeah. I mean, now there are some good Asian products out there, and I've done a couple of reviews on them. I got one that I thought was excellent. And I mean, that one worked out really well. And I think it cost me like $280. It's a 9-gallon. So still, I'm into it for less than $300. And a lot of times when I do a review like that, I'll buy the equipment, and then I wind up giving it away or something, or stored it away. I got stills all over the place, culture. Man, it's almost a passion. One of these days I have a museum. But
and if you're listening to the show and you've never been to George's channel, you should see his shop. It's definitely I call it the mad scientist layer of distilling.
Oh man, it's fun. I'll tell you, it's fun out here. I spend all day out here. Yeah, okay. But that's That's kind of all you really need. Now, there are some products out there, and I mean, in order to give a good shout out, Brewhouse. Brewhouse.com is a good, reputable company, as well as Mile High Distilling. They both use 304 stainless steel. They've got excellent products. As a matter of fact, their parts are interchangeable. You can go on there. You can pick up a 3-gallon on like Mile High, a 3-gallon Mighty Mini combination pot reflux. Still, you can do both for still less than $300. And I mean, look, in 3 gallons, if you run that, you're going to get 2 quarts, 180 proof. You're going to wind up making 4 bottles. If you need to make a whole lot more than 4 bottles, you may need to just go get you a bigger still,
and to be honest, you have to really think about if I, and this is me personally, if I'm going to be distilling something, 4 bottles of liquor, I don't go through 4 bottles of liquor in a year, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the difference between liquor and beer is so vast. Yeah. And I have a friend down the street. He makes he'll start off with about 5 gallons on his first runnings, right? And then by the time he's done, he's like, I end up with like a half gallon when I'm done. Yeah. And so it's kind of, and he's like, and it's plenty of booze. Trust me.
Oh yes, it is. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. But I mean, but I don't know. It's the thing about it is, for guys in particular, old guys like us, you like to sit out in the shade, get your friends over, and for some reason you get it still running, and we'll sit and stare at it dripping. We'll just stare at it. It's like mesmerizing. We don't know why, but you just can't help it, So you run it just because it's fun. It's a novelty, It's there's the allure, and then of course you have all of the variations of. Again, watch our videos. We've got a lot of information there about what you can do to it. Cutting, finishing, aging, making gin, making rum, making a clean vodka, making limoncello. Gosh, I mean, the list is almost endless. And oh, by the way, you are only held back by your imagination.
Yeah, you talked about cutting in there, right? And I think that's something that is, right, to me personally, a big mystery. If I were to start out, I don't even know what that means. So,
okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're good. What does cutting mean? Like,
okay, if you're running a process good, if you're do it George's way. If you're doing it what I would consider proper, and you're efficient at it, you're going to draw off. If you run the pot still, you're going to draw. You'll start at 160 proof, okay? And it'll progressively go down to, and I stop at 100 proof. If you're going to run a reflux still, you'll start off at 180 or 190 proof, and it'll stay there throughout the run until it gets to the end. Now, the commercial standard is like 80 proof. So if you're drinking a bourbon, Wild Turkey's 101, and people run away from Wild Turkey because it's way too strong. So cutting is the process of taking your finished spirit that you run out of the still, which is really, really concentrated, and then adding a mixing agent. And normally we would add either spring water, distilled water. You can use juices. I mean, there's a lot of different things you can do. And oh, by the way, Brewing Hops we got apps that will help you work your way through that. I mean, go figure, we're moving into the century. But we got some apps that'll help you figure that out. But it does it by volume. What's your proof, and how much do you want, what it is now, what you want it to be, and how much you got. Okay, pour this much in, and then boom, Bob's your uncle. You're there. But cutting is the process of reducing the strength of the alcohol to a drinkable, consumable, enjoyable level. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. It's kind of like when you have bourbons that are barrel proof, that they haven't really cut them, right? And they're just pulling it right out of the barrel, putting it in a bottle, and they usually are well above 100 proof, right? They're usually like 120, 130.
Yeah, there are some, not many that are that high. Believe it or not, you'll find it hard. You may find some specialties that are 110, 115 specialties, but anything above that is you won't find much of a commercial desire for that because it's just that strong.
Yeah, and well, the other thing is that you get to a certain strength and it just burns, right? You kind of lose flavor.
Yeah, there ain't enough smoothing in the world.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that I've heard a lot of, and it's a question that I don't know the answer to, is I hear things about head, tails, and hearts. And
Yeah.
So what are those?
Oh, wow. This is a long. Of course, I got a video on that, but I'm going to give it to you down and dirty. Okay, you have certain cuts within your process. At the very beginning, you have 4 shots. 4 shots this is sort of like the equivalent in a 5-gallon mash. 4 shots are really going to be your methanol, if there is any. Okay, there is very, very little in a sugar. There's still very, very little. Now, and George, I'll go online and say this: you could not produce enough methanol in a still to hurt yourself or anybody else. So dispel that rumor right up front, okay?
Okay.
Because remember, you're going to make your alcohol the same way you make beer or wine. The only difference is in a still, you take the first 2 ounces and throw it away because you know it's methanol. But you leave it in the wine and you leave it in the beer. I mean, what the hell, right?
Yep.
So, so that's your first 2 ounces. After that, on average, about 4 to 6 ounces are what we call our heads. And our heads are, we're talking about a 5-gallon, okay? Our heads are filled with some of those separate level alcohols, and you'll be able to notice them because they'll be really, really high proof at the very beginning. Like in a pot still, you'll probably be at 170 proof. And that will, after about 4 to 6 ounces, that will drop to like 160 proof, which is unreal. You're like, how could it drop that fast? Well, it dropped that fast because now you're in the heart. And that's the stuff you want to keep. Now, remember we talked about that curve, that azeotropic curve of the blend of ethanol and water?
Yep.
Okay, as we start to move our way across the scale, and now I pick 204 degrees and 100 proof. That's where I stop. And I do that because I know that based scientifically, if I look at the scale, there is a drastic change in the volume of ethanol, which is dropping because it's on the back end of the run, and the water, which is increasing. And oh, by the way, since the volume's changing, it takes a little more energy to make that separation. So it's a little hotter. And guess what? That's the perfect environment for your tails to start spitting out. So I stop so that I never get to my tails because George just doesn't like collecting tails. I have no use for them. And again, I'm not going to run a still for an extra hour to collect a quart of tails. Okay, you follow me?
Yeah, it's kind of like if you're trying to get every last drop possible out of a batch, you could go that road.
Right.
But
you could go that road, yeah.
But if you've got a still, what's the point, right?
Exactly. You're not going to drink it. And you're not going to mix with because and oh, by the way, when you're cutting, and people need to know this, if you're cutting your shine and you pour water in it, you're getting it down. You start at 140 proof and you pour water in, and you're cutting it down to 80, and it starts to turn cloudy. Guess what? That's the first indication that you got tails in there.
Okay.
Yeah, you collected too long, and you collected tails, and you didn't know it. You can tell tails because normally they will smell like wet cardboard. You can feel them; they feel like there's an oily sheen. You can actually see it dripping in the jar if you look really, really close. But when you start to cut them, what happens is they are oils. They're oil-based. They're called fusel oils. And because they are transparent in a high alcohol environment, when you reduce that alcohol environment themselves to water molecules and become long chains, and oh, by the way, boom, boom, bingo, and there's nothing to do but rerun it. Sorry.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's it in a nutshell. I hope that was helpful.
No, super helpful.
Yeah.
So still kind of talking about, if I've never distilled before, why don't you just explain to me what the distilling process is? I know we kind of bounced all over the place so far, but I think that's something good to talk about. Like, obviously there's a mash involved.
Yeah,
and then let's say we've mashed and we've got some alcohol. What is actually happening in a still all the way to where it's dripping out the other side? What's going on there?
Oh, very good. Yeah, that's a great one. Now remember, if you're a beer brewer, you'll understand this a whole lot more because it's exactly, or a winemaker, it's exactly the same process. You need a fermenter, which is normally like a 7-gallon bucket, 8-gallon bucket, whatever, however size you need for whatever size mash you're going to make. Now you make a mash. It all depends. Of course, in beer we call it wort. In wine we call it lees. right? I mean, or must. I mean, what we give it all different names for the different communities, but it's all the same thing. You go through your fermentation process and you follow your hydrometer, and I look for a starting gravity of about 1.090. That would leave me with, if fully fermented, about 12.5, 13% alcohol by volume.
Okay, and just a quick question to interject here. So the kinds of yeast generally you're using are going to be a little more alcohol tolerant than like an ale yeast, right?
Right, exactly.
Okay.
I'll use Distiller's Active Dry Yeast. Sometimes you may have to it depends on what you're doing. I mean, there's a long discussion about that. You may have to augment it if you're running some challenges. But if you're taking care of, and by the way, a pound of Distiller's Active Dry Yeast, which will last you about 50 batches, is like $20. So it's dirt cheap. Now,
very different than brewer's yeast.
Very different. Yeah, you're spending $4 to $7 for a package of yeast that's 11 grams. We're getting a whole pound. Okay. Yeah. Now, awesome. The fermentation process is done, and you check it with your hydrometer, of course, and then, of course, you degas it just like you would wine, and then you clarify it. Now, you can clarify it a couple different ways. You can use bentonite, sparkaloid. Sound familiar?
Yep. Wine.
Absolutely. You can use Instaglass. Whatever you want to use. I like to use TurboClear because it's Keosol sand, and it clears it out in like 24 to 48 hours. And now you've got your mash, wash, whatever you want to call it, ready. And then you set the still up and you transfer that into the still without sucking up any of the sediment on the bottom. And then you find a means to heat that. Now, you can either use propane. You can use wood. They used to do that a long time ago. And that's, by the way, where the thumper came from. So the thumper was used initially to control heat. Okay? Because if I looked over and said, hey, Coulter, man, this thing's drop 10 degrees. You're like, how many logs do I take? Oh, no, just start jerking them out. They put a thumper in the middle of it to control temperature. People think there's the allure, you need a thumper. Please stay away from them. That's just my advice. Okay. So you get this thing heated up and it starts to heat up. You bring it up to about 145. 145 is where your methanol starts to vaporize. Now, remember, we've got that ethanol water mixture. So we know that right at about 172-ish or so, 173, somewhere up in that neighborhood, your ethanol is going to come out. Well, I usually run still at like 165 and stop. I just turn the heat off or adjust the heat. I use PID controllers because they're just so predictable and they're precise. But
precise to a tenth of a degree. They do not move.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I just hold it there for like 10 minutes, and anything that comes out is done. I mean, it's either 4 shots or heads. I don't. And then I bring it up to 173, and from then on, I'm collected, So, and you do that, and what you're looking for, your output on a standard still of a 2-inch column, 3-inch column, where you've got a big bowl on the top and you've got a worm coming off, should be dribble, dribble, spurt, dribble, dribble, spurt. Not like you see on moonshiners where, it's just coming out like somebody turned a hose on.
Yeah.
Yeah. You should be able to collect on a 2-inch column. You should be able to run a 5-gallon mash in about 4 hours. On a 3-inch column, I can run that in about 2 hours. So, as the column gets larger, remember we talked about efficiency. When the column gets a little bit larger, your efficiency goes skyrocketing, and the time it takes to make that separation and transfer drops dramatically.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally makes sense. And then basically what spits out the other side is a neutral spirit. And once you have that neutral spirit, you can pretty much do whatever you want. You can make whiskey out of it. You can make vodka out of it. You mentioned limoncello. You just can go brandy. You can go nuts with it, right?
You can go back crazy with it. Yeah, and I'll be careful because I know this is a podcast. You can go back. I call it back crazy.
Yeah, so that I think that was a really great walkthrough, just kind of explaining the temperatures and what happens in distilling, and really.
Coulter, if I spent one evening with you, I could save you all the challenge. Of course, it would be fun. Spent one evening with you and said, okay, let's start here. Let's go from here. We got the map still. By the time we got done, all the collection, jars, and we look at each other and do the self high five, and then a double high five. I'm like, you got any questions? You'd be like, dude, I got this.
Yeah, exactly.
And then from then on, you're just fine tuning. I mean, now you're looking for those efficiencies that we talked about, and you're getting see, because I'm a believer in, if I know everything that I could possibly know, you're never going to know everything. But if I know, like sugar, if I know that you got glucose, sucrose, and fructose, and I know that yeast eat glucose first, and I know that I can invert the sugar, so I got high fructose because sucrose they don't like to eat because they got to work really hard to break it down. I mean, so if I can break efficiency, if I know everything about a topic, should something go wrong in my distilling process or my brewing process, I can generally sit back and look and go, oh, that's the problem. Let me go fix that, and everything's back to normal.
Exactly. One of the things that we talk about on the show all the time is some of the DIY projects that we do.
Yeah.
Actually, that's how we found you on the show. You made that amazing cooler out of your AC unit, and then used it and it was part of your distilling process. You were using it to cool down, so you had your vapor. You're using the cooler to get it to convert back into liquid, right?
Yeah.
And using the AC unit meant you didn't have to fill it with ice and waste a bunch of ice, right?
Exactly. And I was recycling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that thing works. I'll tell you what, man, that thing works. It's a beautiful thing. It's a little bit big, but it's 90 quart, so it's more than I really need. I'll go big or go home. I got it. It works perfect.
Hey, it's efficient, right? It gets it down and boom. And I was at a buddy's house. He was actually distilling I live in Denver, Colorado. It had just snowed, and he just had a cooler filled with snow.
Yeah. Take advantage of what you got. Yeah.
Hey, now, exactly.
The guy I work with really closely, Mark, from down in Houston area, he's come up with a radiator style cooling system that is similar to what I've done, but it's on a much smaller scale with two small radiators that are probably about wide, by 15 inches tall, and with fans on them. And he's run his still several times, and he's able to maintain a cooling temperature that rivals just about anything that comes out of the faucet. So that's another one of them ideas for the future. We're kind of working on. Not marketable, but is it effective and efficient enough to share? You don't want to share something that's junk.
Exactly.
But I mean, by any stretch of the imagination, what Mark does is not junk. But we're trying to fine tune its applicability.
Yeah. Well, and you do a ton of amazing DIY projects on your show, and like you said, once you've kind of got them dialed, you then share them with the community and kind of go through what you went through to build it. You shared something with me today, and I want to talk about it because this thing is super cool. Yeah. You shared with me today, and I'm pulling it up here on my computer, and it's an image. And just for those who are listening, I'm actually going to post a photo of this on the show notes. If you head over to homebrewingdiy.beer, look under this show, and on the show notes on the website, I'll have a photo of this project that George has built. And this thing is cool. It's a prototype, but it is. I'm going to say it. Tell me if I got this right. It's an audible proof and trail hydrometer that you made for some of your blind lists. Some of the people that are blind that actually are part of your community.
Blind distillers, absolutely. Yeah,
blind distillers. And this thing is super cool. It's a hydrometer that basically, tell me if I got it right, actually calls out the numbers audibly to someone who can't see, so that they know what their proof and trail hydrometer readings are, right?
Exactly. That's it in a nutshell. That's exactly what it does, and it does it on an over. And of course, we put a button on it. If you get tired of listening to the voice, you just push it and it shuts up. And then you're like, I really want to know what it is now. You push, it starts talking again.
Yeah, so I'm curious, what is in this thing? Like, how did you get it to do it audibly? How did you get it to get the readings? Like, I know this was a project, and what was that process like, and how did you kind of get there?
Yeah, I love talking about this, and I'll try to make this as short as possible, because what I want to do is I want to be able to share this in our YouTube video, and I promise to everybody I will. You just got to give me time to get there because it is complicated. No, for me, it's complicated. Okay. For you, it won't be when I get there. Of course, it was born out of the need for a hydrometer that speaks so that our blind community can hear it, and you just are seeing impaired, or hell, we got lazy guys that they want to hear it. It works for anybody and everybody. Plus, there's a window, so you just want to see it anyway. But what we did was we worked with Arduino. Now, if you're familiar with Arduino, and by the way, this is a work prototype that is right now in the state of Florida, I think the only one in the world, and it's being utilized. I put it through its paces here and couldn't fail it, and it's down there being abused, and I'm loving it. Now, we use an Arduino that interfaces with our regular world, and so what we can do is we can use sensors, and I thought about a lot of different RFID tagging, I thought about sound, and what I came up with, I said, I need something that is accurate, but is simple and simple enough that I can control with a small microprocessor. So I use an Arduino Uno, or you can use the Nano. It works on, or the Mega, which is a huge one, but it'll work on all of them. And I use a time of flight sensor. And this is for anybody out there who's interested. You can catch this. This is a VL53L1X. Okay, VL53L1X. And they're like $3. And what you do is you mount this in the of the tube that goes on top, and the measurements are like 200 centimeters tall. It's really cool. What this thing does is it shoots a laser. Now, I was going to use sound, but I knew that sound is affected by humidity, so I didn't want any variations in it. But light is not. So this shoots out a radar light, a beam that goes down, and it hits the top of the hydrometer and comes back, and it measures the time it took that light beam to go down and reflect back.
Wow.
And then it goes through the Arduino. Arduino goes, well, I'll be doggone. It is like, what? Okay, that's 112 proof. 112 proof. I mean, it'll keep going until that changes.
That is so awesome. And so are you planning on, putting out all of the plans for this, keeping it open source? Is that the plan?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the reason, that's why I say, give me time, because the complicated portion of that is not really the build. It is sharing with the community, like on GitHub, the libraries that you can go to. Because I just want somebody to be able to go click this, load it, boom, it's done, it worked. Instead of you trying to go through the 35 days that Mark and I say painlessly. And I'll tell you, Mark is a godsend. I mean, that a proof and trail hydrometer, the difference between 0 proof and 10 proof is probably about 3 millimeters. Well, the difference between 160 proof and 170 proof is about 35 millimeters. You follow me? So the scale is skewed. So he had to develop algorithms that took the upper, middle, lower, and based on he's a lot smarter than I am. and so he talked me through it, and we did the back and forth. Man, it was a great thing. And then I just recorded voice, and I put that on an SD card reader that attaches to the Arduino, and you just tell it from Arduino users know this. You go from pin number 10, and you tell it you want it to speak, and it just reaches in there and it grabs it. It goes, okay, speak this, and it does. So it's an amazing, and I know I'm simplifying it to a degree, but what we had to overcome to get to this point is what now makes it simple. Okay.
Yeah, but I think we're doing an audio podcast, and to really talk about code or something like that on an audio podcast is tough.
Right.
I think actually talking about it at a high level is really good, because it helps people visualize what this piece of equipment does, and kind of the detail that really went into it, right? I mean, the idea that you're taking a light sensor and having it check the level in there, and based on that level, it's able to read back to you is really a great approach.
It is. Yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, super cool.
And I'd like everybody to know as well too, is that when I get these published, I don't want you to be afraid of it. Okay, If you've never touched an Arduino, even if you follow the videos, you go screw. You can have a wire in the wrong place and it's going to work. When you're done, and I'll explain it in as much detail as necessary, but you'll feel comfortable and go, wow, I wonder what else I can do. Now I am programming, I understand Arduino, and I understand how to interface with. My goodness, man, I could put lights on the porch. I could put a sensor out front, tell me when my truck pulls. I mean, it's unlimited to what you could potentially do.
Absolutely. And I'm actually, I'll testament to that. You know, my first project was I made a brew pie for my fermentation chamber back in 2014. It was my first Arduino project, right? Found some really good instructions that needed little to no soldering, right? It was something I could do with some wire nuts. I did end up doing some soldering in the end on the first project, but it was approachable at that level. And going through that project actually helped me get a passion for it. And if you saw my tubs and tubs of parts and processors now laying around my house, you would understand that, like, wow, it's turned into a thing. It is kind of a hobby in itself, the electronics and stuff. But the cool thing is in 2020, and really for the last 10 years, ever since they came out with things like the Arduino and the Raspberry Pi, we're now able to build the kinds of electronics that you know, an Internet of Things types devices that you could have only got spit out of a factory 20 years ago.
Exactly.
And so, you know, these types of things are so approachable, and you're seeing the benefits of that. Specifically, you see a lot in distilling and brewing in general. You see things like the Eisspindel, you see things like the craft beer pie, you see things like the brew pie. You know, a project like you've made here, which is this, you know, your audible proof and trail hydrometer. But the idea is that, you know, you can come up with a problem, and chances are somebody has solved that problem maybe for another application, and you can find it on GitHub and then turn it into something that's your own. It's really a cool, like, if you're a tinkerer like me, and I know you're a tinkerer, you're now in a place where these electronics have really overcome some problems that, you know, you can do mechanically, right? And so it's just really a cool time to be part of something like that. And
it really is. I mean, look, I'm a 61-year-old country boy. If I can do it, anybody can do it. You know, and you mentioned Eisspindel too, because I'm in the midst of building the Eisspindel. You know, and if you go to
me too. I'm in the
open source distilling. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, I'm in the middle of building one too, and I'm using his same instructions on open source distilling. Maybe I need to get him on the show.
That would be that, and let him know how much I appreciate, because I'm going to do a video on it. I'll give him all the credit because he deserves it. But I mean, I've got it right here in my hand, man. My batteries showed up today. I mean, I've got everything in there. All I got to do is I already know this. All I got to do is flash the Arduino in here, the microprocessor. I mean, and then calibrate it, and it should work. So the jury's out. But I got it.
I did build mine. Mine actually, I've had some problems with my it's not an Arduino, it's an ESP8266. My microcontroller would not take the flash, and then because you know, with those, they're $2. Sometimes you get a bad one. It's just kind of part of it. I got a bad one, and then I had to unsolder the SP off of the board again, and then I damaged the board, and now I've got to start over. But that's part of the deal, and I'm out about a total of about $7, so it's not a big loss there. I am out of a little bit of time and just getting it back together, but it's still, I had a great time doing it. It was a fun project, and I know what's wrong with it, and I know what I need to do to fix it. But I am in the middle of an Eisspindel as well.
Oh, so super, man! That's great. I'm glad to hear somebody else out there playing with it too, man. As a matter of fact, I ordered a bunch of the stuff right when I started ordering. I was like, give me 6 of those, and give me 6 of them, and 6 of them. And the reason I did that is because, from my experience, I do like what you just talked about. I'll screw one of them up, and I'm like, oops. I don't have to reorder. I say, okay, I just go get it on the way and start
exactly.
over. And I'll eventually get one right. I'm like, okay. Believe it or not, like you said, it's worth the $7 that I paid for the thing.
Yeah, well, and I think the total amount of parts for an ice spindle is like $25. It's not that it's expensive. It does have a little bit of know-how, but it's even gotten easier. I've been following that project since I found it on a German website back in 2014. But I never pulled the trigger on one. I have a tilt hydrometer. That is actually what I use on my day-to-day.
You like that?
Oh, I love it. It's great. Couldn't recommend it enough. And I actually I'm going to say I would actually recommend the tilt over the ice spindle for a couple of reasons. The tilt hydrometer actually uses Bluetooth Low Energy, and because of that, it's very efficient power-wise. And my battery just died on mine, and I bought mine in 2017. So, and the battery's $3 on Amazon to replace. I'm actually it's in the middle of a brew and it died, so I have to replace it now.
Shucks.
Not a big deal. But it's I now have to bust out my hydrometer. Oh well. And then but then the other piece that I like about it as well is that it's out of the box ready to go, and there's a lot of software that works for it out of the box. Like your Brewfather can interface with iSpindle, not iSpindle. It does interface with iSpindle as well, but it can interface with the tilt hydrometer right out of the box, and it also will interface with things like Ferment Track. It will also interface with a lot of the other Brewer's Friend. I know it does. So the idea is that it's really an open platform for that type of thing, even though it's a commercial product. So just throwing it out there, the tilt hydrometer I highly recommend. That being said, I also can't beat a nice spindle for about $20 worth of parts. So
there you go. Yeah, and maybe the next time that we talk, I'll be able to give you some feedback. How well it worked or not, because I'm excited about getting it going and trying to run it through its paces, because I try to make, once I get something made, I like try to make it fail. That's the whole idea about testing. And
hey, maybe we'll do. Here's what we're gonna do, George, for the next show. Next time I have you on the show, we're gonna compare what our processes were of getting our ice spindles to work.
Man, that'd be a great idea.
We're gonna have you back when you get yours up, and when I get mine up, and then we're gonna just talk through what we went through to get through it, and that could actually be an episode.
Sounds like you're right. That could be a heck of an episode. Tell you what, that's great. Okay.
Well, we're running out of time here for the show, so I want to we'll wrap it up. But George, I want to once again thank you so much for coming on the show again. I got to be honest, I love having you on the podcast. You're such a wealth of knowledge, and as well, you're just I love your approach to distilling and brewing in general. It's just, you're such a great person to talk to. So I love having you on the show. And I thank you so much for taking your time out of your busy day to come over and talk to, me and my listeners. We really appreciate it.
Not a problem, my friend. Anytime, if you ever need me, a holler. I'm always here. Okay?
Absolutely. Thanks, George.
Thank you.
I want to thank George for coming on this week's show. It's always great to have him, and I really love having him on the podcast. I will put a link to his YouTube channel in our show notes, so head over to homebrewingdiy.beer and check it out. I'll also put a link to his distilling series for beginners. Other than that, check us out on our social media. Look for @homebrewingdiy on Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram. And we'll see you next week on Homebrewing DIY.